The 2022 Brazilian presidential election was a big deal. Jair Bolsonaro, the president at the time, ran on being conservative, liking free markets, and being tough on crime. His opponent, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, wanted to bring back the left-leaning policies from when he was president before. The election was really close, with both sides trying hard to get people to vote. In the end, Lula won, which was a big change for Brazil. But what if things had gone differently? Imagine if Bolsonaro had won a second term. Thinking about this isn't just a game. It helps us understand how fragile democracy is, and what could happen if elections go a different way. It shows how fast things can change and how easily a country can go down a different path. This look at what might have been explores what could have happened if Bolsonaro had won in 2022. It looks at how his leadership might have affected politics, the economy, society, and the environment. This isn't a prediction, but a warning. If Bolsonaro had won in 2022, it would have been a huge shock to Brazil's politics. His first term was full of fights with the courts, the legislature, and other parts of the government that he thought were getting in his way. A second term might have made him even bolder in trying to grab more power and weaken democracy. Bolsonaro's attacks on the Supreme Federal Court, which he saw as blocking him, would probably have gotten worse. His supporters repeating what he said would have put even more pressure on the court. This could have caused a constitutional crisis, with people questioning if the court was even legitimate. The independence of the judiciary, which is super important for any democracy, would have been in serious danger. The electoral tribunal, which makes sure elections are fair, would have also been under a lot of pressure. The very foundation of Brazil's democracy, which was hard to achieve after years of authoritarian rule, would have been at risk. Bolsonaro's economic plan was all about free markets, less government regulation selling off government-owned businesses, and a smaller role for the government in the economy. A second term would have given him the chance to do even more of this, which might have had good and bad results. On the one hand, his policies might have brought in money from foreign investors and helped some parts of the economy grow. His focus on less bureaucracy and simpler rules might have been good for businesses and investors, maybe creating jobs and helping the economy expand. However, this growth might have had a downside. Bolsonaro's focus on the free market would probably have made the gap between the rich and the poor even bigger. Social programs which were already struggling might have been cut even more. The possibility of economic instability caused by inequality and a lack of safety nets would have been a big worry for Brazil's future. A big part of Bolsonaro's presidency was the military getting more involved in things that are usually handled by civilians. A second term could have made this even worse, with the armed forces having even more power in the government and making policy decisions. Bolsonaro, a former army captain, has always really liked the military. He filled his cabinet with former generals and often talked about how great the armed forces are. If he had been re-elected, he might have given the military even more power, maybe even taking power away from civilian institutions. This increased military presence would have had a big impact on how Brazil interacts with other countries. Bolsonaro's liking for strongman leaders and his dislike for working with other countries could have made Brazil more isolated. The possibility of more human rights abuses under a government with a stronger military would have been a serious worry. Not many things were as controversial during Bolsonaro's presidency as his views on social and cultural issues. His conservative views on things like gender, sexuality, and race made a lot of people upset, making the divisions in society even worse. If Bolsonaro had been re-elected, it would have given more power to conservative and evangelical groups who were some of his biggest supporters. These groups would probably have pushed for policies that fit their beliefs, maybe on things like abortion, same-sex marriage, and sex education. This could have led to fewer rights for women and LGBTQ+ people, causing protests from progressive groups. Bolsonaro's government often fought with teachers and academics, saying they were pushing a leftist agenda. His re-election could have meant more government control over schools, with attempts to censor what's taught and limit academic freedom. The possibility of more violence and discrimination against marginalized groups would have been a big worry. The Amazon's fate, environmental policies, and global backlash. Probably nothing Bolsonaro did was more important to the rest of the world than his environmental policies, especially what he did with the Amazon rainforest. If he had been re-elected, it would have had a huge impact on the world's largest rainforest and the fight against climate change. During Bolsonaro's first term, there was a lot more deforestation in the Amazon because his government supported agribusiness and mining. He saw the Amazon as something to be used to make money, and he didn't care about deforestation and how it hurts the environment. His re-election would probably have made this even worse, which could have been devastating. Other countries were already worried about how fast the Amazon was being destroyed under Bolsonaro. If he had been re-elected, some countries might have punished Brazil with sanctions because they were worried about his environmental policies. The rainforest is really important for absorbing carbon dioxide, which helps control the global climate. Brazil 2026, an uncertain future. In this alternate timeline, Brazil in 2026 would be dealing with the results of Bolsonaro's second term. The country would be more divided, more unequal, and more isolated from the rest of the world. Democratic institutions, weakened by years of attacks, would be having a hard time being seen as legitimate. The courts, the legislature, and the press would be under constant pressure, and their independence would be eroded. The rule of law would be shaky, with more corruption and people getting away with crimes. Economically, Brazil would be a country of extremes. While some parts of the economy might have done well because of Bolsonaro's free market policies, others would have been left behind. Inequality would be everywhere, causing social unrest and instability. The Amazon, damaged by deforestation, would be a powerful symbol of how the country's environment had been destroyed.